Hey everyone, and welcome to my first devlog for Even Heroes Die. Today I'll be introducing the project and talking a little bit about what I've accomplished so far, as well as what I hope to achieve. So this project is really special to me because it kind of represents this lifelong dream I've had to make my own game. I love my job as a software engineer, and I never really would have gotten into this field if I hadn't started messing around with Game Maker back in middle school. Back in the day, I would spend hours working on these little Mario knockoffs, but my lack of experience and discipline were ultimately preventing me from making anything meaningful. So now that I'm slightly more disciplined, hopefully several times smarter, and twice as old, I think I'm finally in a good position to actually complete a project. Even Heroes Die is an action platformer with elements from the roguelite and Metroidvania genres. So at this point, I might have lost some of you. A good chunk of you are probably thinking that half of those words didn't even sound real, and the rest of you are rolling your eyes, because roguelike Metroidvania is practically an oxymoron. So a platformer is like a Mario game. You start at point A, you move at point B, you run and jump. A Metroidvania is like a giant maze. So you'll move around in a little bit less of a linear fashion. You'll typically reach a dead end because you don't have the right power, say a super missile launcher. So you'll go around for a while looking for it. Eventually you'll find the super awesome missile launcher, and then you can explore more of the maze. Now when I say roguelite, I basically mean that the game will be different each time you die and start over. So the game in this case is actually smart enough to create its own levels. So all of these terms are now more or less buzzwords on the indie game scene, and a lot of people kind of scoff at the idea of a Metroidvania roguelite. On top of being basically all of the buzzwords in one, most critics will say, oh, well, Metroidvania maps are really complicated, they need to be handcrafted, they're too complex to be generated by an algorithm. And to these people, I'd say that's pretty reasonable. It's kind of hard. This is probably why we don't have any roguelite Zelda knockoffs, at least as far as I'm aware. Please let me know if one of those exists, though. Okay, so counterpoint. Doing hard stuff can be fun. And if you combine an interesting, relatively unsolved problem with my favorite kind of game, you've got something that's really fun to develop. So I'm having a good time making this. I don't know if any of you are going to play it, but what's more important when you're developing a product? Having fun doing it? People buying it? So the general game loop goes something like this. Major, but definitely planned out story details aside, your player character has been cursed with a mortal illness. So you'll wander about a procedurally generated kingdom in search of a cure, and the longer you search, the worse your condition gets. Levels will be split into overworld areas and dungeon areas. It's kind of like a Zelda game. If I'm being completely honest here, it's probably less even like a Metroidvania and more like a Zelda-vania, whatever. It's complicated enough already to describe the genre. There's definitely going to be a lot of Zelda inspiration going into this. There's a lot of overlap between the Zelda and Metroidvania genres anyway, except Zelda games aren't typically 2D platformers. Well, the good ones anyway. So as you explore these areas, you'll come across new abilities and upgrades, antidotes to extend your life, and money to buy both of those things. To keep things interesting, the order in which you take on these different levels will be completely up to you. You'll generally follow the flow of overworld area and then the corresponding dungeon area, but what I'm saying here is the order that you can go to these different overworld areas is going to be up to you. And then if you finish one and you decide you don't want to go to that dungeon, you can go somewhere else. It's all up to you. Do what you want. To me, it just seems really limiting to have you start up a run and say every time, okay, now you have to go to the forest area, then you got to go to the lava area. Even if I did shuffle up the order of the areas, kind of forcing that linear set of goals in each of your runs, sounded like it would get old kind of quickly. I'm thinking the different areas will pull from their own pools of items. So say you go to the forest first, you know you're probably going to find a wind boomerang or a glide leaf. You start to kind of recognize what items you're going to find in each area. And so what this allows you to do is you start to get intimate knowledge about the different areas you can go to. And now you can say, well, wow, I really suck at this volcano area, but it really helps me if I first go to the forest and I pick up one of the items there. Makes my journey through the volcano a lot easier. So here I'm really trying to strike an important balance of randomness and replayability with familiarity and reward for learning the game. You'll find that I draw a lot of Zelda inspiration, and particularly in this game, I was inspired by Majora's Mask. In a way, I'm kind of trying to recreate that cycle of I only have 3 days to do X before I die. The main difference here is that instead of racing against a moon that's coming crashing down on you, you're battling a mortal illness. So obviously, to make this whole 3-day cycle thing fit into a roguelite game, where runs typically only last about an hour, and that'll be a good run where you're close to winning, I'm going to break it up into smaller cycles of, say, 5 minutes. And so you'll notice that as time goes on, you have this reverse health meter in the bottom corner that's filling up towards a skull. Meters with skulls on them, generally bad. You don't want those to fill up. Once it does, the player will enter a near-death state. I'm planning for a few different scenarios at this point, but here's one that I have implemented for my upcoming demo. Your character's health drops, he starts to hallucinate, and a Grim Reaper figure starts to chase you around, and it'll instantly kill you if it catches you. Sounds fun. And if you've played Spelunky, it might sound a little familiar. So now you've got a fighting chance. If you can survive until the hallucinations end, your 6-minute timer will restart, and you'll come out largely unharmed. It's risky, but it's possible. Your safer option will be to find and drink from a magic vial. There will be a variety of color-coded vials all throughout the world that you can find or purchase. These will reset your 6-minute timer and extend your life, but they come with their own risky side effects. Some side effects include max health and stamina loss, dizziness, weight gain, and memory loss. So now the player has a bunch of choices. Based on what antidotes they've found, they can choose what negative effects they receive. And if they don't have any, or they don't like their options, they can always opt to take a chance on whatever cruel fate the illness has in store for them. So if you couldn't tell, I think forcing lots of grueling choices on the player is at the heart of what makes a great roguelite. I just want to say most of the assets you see in this video were drawn by me, and I will freely admit that I'm not an artist. You're just going to have to trust me when I say the art you're seeing is a lot better than the circles and boxes I was using at first. Everything else is just an asset I found on itch.io. Everything is subject to change. I'd really like to get a talented pixel artist on board at some point, but I need to keep this game in scope. This isn't the first game I've ever worked on, but it will be the first that I really hope to complete and put out for sale. It's really easy for projects like these to become overambitious and drag on for years until the creator runs out of steam. I want to try to avoid that. To do that, I think it's going to be really important for me to limit my scope as much as possible and go with a less is more approach. So I really need to be picky about what features I'm adding to the game and really just try to keep it as lean as possible. In my head, I'm envisioning 4 main areas to explore, each with a dungeon that shares a lot of the same themes and mechanics. Right now I'm working on the first area, and I've been really trying to design these smaller systems that can fit together in interesting ways. So take wind, for example. It can be used to lift up rocks, which can be used as platforms. It can also carry bombs upward, or the player if he has a glider. These drafts can be found on their own, but they can also be created by setting fire to a pile of flammable leaves, for instance, or by spinning and holding the wind boomerang in place. A lot of Zelda inspiration here, but the key takeaway here, a lot of small systems that can interact with each other to create lots of interesting situations. That's really at the heart of what made games like Spelunky so much fun. So I've been working really hard these past few months to build a mini version of each of the game's core systems. I've heard this referred to as a vertical slice. So because of that, you'll probably notice there isn't too much variety in the level layouts, or the enemies, or really much of anything. My next step is to start fleshing everything out a little bit more. I want to start by making the forest and dungeon areas feel like distinct places with their own enemies and upgrades to find. I also think I need to add some more room layouts before I can even consider this for a demo. Part of me wanted to make this video a lot earlier, but I kept waiting to have something worth showing off. When I realized I'd probably have nothing that I was really willing to show 100%, and that I would just keep finding more excuses not to show it, I decided I should just put this thing out as quickly as I can, start building a community, and getting some good feedback. I'm working hard to get that vertical slice done. That's going to be my main focus, so I can release a demo. Not really sure when that's going to be out, but my goal is the end of the year. I think it's really important for the game's development that I get a lot of feedback early on about how it feels and what works and what doesn't. So this has been my first devlog in the video series, but I've been blogging about the game's development for several months now. I usually put out a new post about once a week, just kind of talking about the nitty-gritty details of the system I'm currently implementing, whatever I'm working on. It's definitely more tech-heavy, so if you're into coding, programming, game design, that sort of thing, it's definitely an interesting read. If you kind of just want to know my thought process as I'm coming up with all these different things, I think it would also be good for that too. Or if you just want more frequent updates on the game, see a screenshot or two here and there every week, that might be for you too. Since these videos seem to take a lot more time for me to create than just blog posts, I'm thinking right now these will probably come out on a more monthly rather than weekly basis. If I don't create enough good content to show off visually, there's not really going to be much to make a video about. I think a good goal would be another video before the end of the year when my demo comes out. So yeah, this was Even Heroes Die. I love Zelda games, I love Metroidvanias, and I love roguelites. Maybe this genre or these different genres have gotten a little bit oversaturated recently, but I really do think that there's a place for a game like this. I love games like Splunky and Dead Cells, and I really find myself wanting to play a game like this. So, hoping I'm not the only one. Alright, that's all I've got for today. Leave a comment and let me know what you think. Please consider subscribing if you want to stay up to date with the project and be notified as soon as I have a playable demo. Alright, see you guys next time.